Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of the Android Office Hours. If you ever had an app rejected or felt confused by a policy email, you are not alone. We know that navigating Google Play policies can sometimes feel daunting, especially for developers in regions who are dealing with unique constraints. So today, we are pulling back the curtain. We brought in Dan and Akshay from the Google Play Trust and Safety team to help demystify the publishing processes and give you the tool to publish faster and with confidence. We have a packed session for you today. We'll start with a few ecosystem updates, move into the Play deep dive, and wrap up with a dedicated Q&A session at the end. Without further ado, let me get started with the ecosystem update. First up, many developers in regions like SSA and MENAT reported that running Android Studio on local hardware that are often, low-powered laptops and desktop can be a massive bottleneck. Well, Google AI Studio now allows you to build, prototype, and iterate on native Android apps directly in the browser using an embedded emulator. You can even deploy to Play Console internal testing tracks without needing a heavy local installation. This significantly lowers the barrier to entry for native Android development in resource constrained environments. In fact, Logan from DeepMind reported that within a week of this launch, an incredible 250,000 Android apps were built. Please give it a try and let us know any feedback you may have. Next, if you if your startup or enterprise team is currently maintaining a React Native or iOS first code base and dreading the cost of building for native Android, this is for you. The new and experimental migration assistant in Android Studio will intelligently map features and convert your code into native Kotlin and Jetpack Compose. Paired with the new stable Android CLI and our open source skills, your AI agents can now do true semantic symbol resolution and create Jetpack Compose UI for you. This has the potential to turn weeks of porting into hours. Next, Android 17 is introducing mandatory app memory limits to ensure system stability. If your app is bloated, it will be terminated by the system. To help you prepare for this, we are launching the R8 configuration analyzer to shrink your binaries and a new AI-powered Android performance analyzer. If you're building for entry-level devices, mastering these tools is no longer optional. It is required to keep your app alive. And finally, dealing with fragmented OEM hardware and low spec camera sensor is a daily struggle in regions like SSA and MENAT. We are streamlining this with a new Camera X viewfinder composable and Codec DB. Codec DB provides chipset specific encoding recommendations, meaning you can deliver premium, optimized media experiences without having to manually write workarounds for every specific entry-level device on the market. But All of these do not matter if you cannot get your apps to your user in a timely manner. We have heard your feedback about long wait time for app reviews. And in this new world where 250,000 apps can be built in under a week, it is almost humanly impossible to review these manually. So we are introducing AI support and a support assistant inside the Google Play console, and this will lead to faster app reviews. That's just a cherry pick list of all the announcements at I/O. We also announced offline first AI with Gemma 4 on Android Bench, which is a great starting point for high data cost regions, and our official shift to a compose first world. We'll drop in a link to Matthew McCullough's full blog post in the chat. Please read through the announcement, all 17 announcements, and let's jump now into the deep dive. One more thing before we wrap up, though, this segment. I want to highlight some incredible uh, community events happening across sub Saharan Africa, the Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey in the next couple of weeks. GDG Zinder is kicking things off with a Build with AI event on June 13th. Then we have a packed mid June with IO extended events in Cairo and Nairobi. That will be followed closely by Build AI events in Alexandria and Riyadh. If you are in or near these cities, we highly encourage you to attend, connect with the community, and get your hands on these new techs. Now, let's shift to the main event. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, we are pulling back the curtain today on Google Play. I'm thrilled to welcome Dan Zilic and Akshay Kumar Singh from the Google Play Trust and Safety team. They are here to give you a deep dive into play policies and share the tools you need to publish faster and with confidence. Thank you, Dan and Akshay, for joining. But before you take it away, can you introduce yourself and share a bit about what you and your team do?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. It's really great to be here at the Android office hours. It's a first for me. Yeah, my name is Dan Zilic. I'm dialing in from Hamburg, Germany, aka the country that will likely win the World Cup starting today, but let's not get into that. Yes, I've been working at Google Play for 4 years. I work within the Trust and Safety organization. I'll be speaking a bit about what that really means in the next couple of slides. But yeah, we've hosted a couple of these webinars. We've answered a lot of questions from developers. We've met a lot of developers. So we're now excited to meet the developers dialing in today. Over to you, Akshay.
Thanks, Dan. Hello, everyone. My name is Akshay. I am also on the Trust and Safety Play team. I've worked on this team for a bit over 5.5 years now, and I'm always excited to present to you to talk about stuff related to policy and to clarify any questions that you might have. This gives us also an opportunity to understand where your pain points lie, what are some areas that we can improve as a team, and you'll see some of the changes that we have brought in specifically after listening to your feedback. So really looking forward to sharing what we have learned for you today. Over to you, Dan.
All right, and with that, Chris, I think we'll kick things off. So yeah, we have a couple of slides for you before we go to the live Q&A. So this is our short but sweet agenda. Like I said, I think the most value you can get out of this is actually us answering questions. So we won't spend too much time on the slides beforehand. But there are a couple of things that we want to show you. So some brief outline on what trust and safety actually does. Why is it important to have policy compliant apps? A couple of best practices and helpful resources until we get to the live Q&A. So let's move on. Sure, like what does trust and safety do? So I think I'll just keep it simple and say that, in our trust and safety organization, so we are an organization for itself within Google, right? We have a lot of different organizations in Google. We have sales teams, we have teams that deal with governments, we have engineers, and we have, folks like Chris as well, dealing with Android developers. So trust and safety is an organization for itself. And we, of course, our aim is working on Google Play to make sure that all users who visit Google Play and install apps, that they have a great experience installing apps and using them. And so we write and enforce policies, more or less. If we move on, one more. So a couple of numbers, and I won't, bore you too much with this. We've published all of this externally, but just, I like sharing these numbers because they do, speak to the immense size of Google Play, right? So obviously, Google Play is comprised of hundreds of thousands of individual apps, and it's used by, billions of users throughout the world. Yes, and some of these, apps that are published, they violate our policies, and hence we remove them. And you can get an idea of the scale of this, by looking at how many apps we removed only last year. 1.75 million apps removed on Google Play. We also ban accounts. We also do a lot of safety checks, etc., etc. And lastly, as you can see on the far right of your screen, we also make sure that user ratings and reviews are also up to scratch and don't violate our policies. So I will also say, right, so within this trust and safety organization that I talk about, most of my colleagues, their job is actually identifying, apps that cause significant user harm, that violate our policies, etc. Whereas Akshay and I, we're more on a team, where we actually, we meet developers, we take feedback when we see that sometimes our policy processes aren't quite where they should be, right? So it's really valuable listening to developers and hearing where sometimes, we also get things wrong, and then refining our processes and policies. Just to speak very briefly about what you see on this slide, this is Google Play Protect. This is a bit different from what we do on our day-to-day basis. I'm sure some of you use Google Play Protect, and essentially, if you've ever tried to maybe install an app that is in some shape or form maybe harmful or so, Google Play Protect is that system that will then sometimes block installs, sometimes also notify users that, hey, you are installing an app here that could be potentially quite dangerous. And again, you can see the scale at which Google Play Protect operates, scanning 350 billion plus apps throughout the entire ecosystem, which is just a staggering figure, to be honest. But anyway, we're not here to talk too much about Google Play Protect or the Play Integrity API. So let's get further to a couple more things just to give you a better understanding of the trust and safety team and the work that we do. Our policies on Google Play, we do get quite a lot of feedback from developers that, we have a lot of policies, and some of these policies, they're also really long and sometimes a bit, hard to understand. But, the challenge that we have is that, with Google Play, there's just like a lot to cover, apps. We have so many different types of apps. And you can imagine, that from a threat perspective, an app, for example, that is in the financial kind of vertical, poses a very different threat to users than maybe one that is published, maybe a game or something like that. And so, we have very specific requirements and policies for all these different categories and verticals and so on. We try to get the balance right in terms of, keeping things easy to understand and not too long. Yes, but in the end, apps are also technical, and sometimes it's not that easy to keep policies short and sweet. But just to let you know, we really do think about these things. We update our policies, 3 times a year as well, and we're constantly on the lookout for, where do we have to maybe, write and reform our policies due to new trends, etc. You can imagine that something like crypto trading, right, wasn't an issue a couple of years ago, but then suddenly, from one day to the next, we see a lot of apps on Google Play that allow crypto trading, which then necessitates, of course, us to write policies, set up processes, etc., etc. Let's move on to the next slide and tell you why is policy compliance important. The one thing I would say, one of the worst experiences a user can have on Google Play is obviously installing an app and then having a very poor experience with this app, maybe even damaging their phone due to malware or something like that, or, their user data being compromised. And, when that happens, users might decide not to use Google Play any longer. And I think that's not in your interest, that's not in our interest. And this is why we do what we do. Basically, so as said, being policy compliant, leads to a healthy ecosystem, which then again, leads to user trust, etc., and hopefully more engagement and installs from Google Play users. And with that, I'm still going to tell you briefly how we enforce our Google Play policies. And I'm sure a couple of you have heard about this before. I always, like talking about this because I think it helps, understand what, different enforcements on our side look like. And so the general idea on Google Play is that essentially every time you make an app update, Google Play or our review teams will review it, and you can only publish this update when it's approved by Google. If it's not approved by us, then we reject it, and then we ask you to fix whatever the issue is, and then to resubmit again. And so a rejection really isn't, anything too dramatic. It can happen, obviously, as I said, we have a lot of policies. Sometimes, a simple oversight can lead to an app rejection, and it has no consequence for your standing of your Google Play developer accounts. We do also, I think there's a lot of talk and chatter about, what the Google Play trust and safety teams do and don't do. As I said before, right, we do actually ban a lot of accounts. We also remove apps from Google Play. So that's all true. But, when we can, we actually send out warnings to developers, right? We give them a heads up and say like, hey, we've identified an issue with your app, and please fix this issue within 7 days, within 14 days, within 30 days. However, sometimes, violations are so egregious, or sometimes, certain violations, we just feel we need to remove, the violating app as soon as possible. In these cases, we block or suspend an app from Google Play, right? And so when that happens, the app can't be installed by users from Google Play anymore. Users who have the app installed won't get any updates through it anymore either. If you're using Google Play billing, that won't work either. If your app is merely blocked, you can address the issue by just sending us a compliant update. If that gets approved and published, then the issue is resolved. For a suspension, this is a bit more serious. So you can only overturn a suspension if you actually file an appeal and if that appeal gets granted. We also sometimes have very specific enforcements. So these lead to limited visibility, limited regions. And so essentially, in these cases, we only make the app not available in specific regions or countries. This is very specific to a couple of very specific policies, such as our payment policies, for example. The last thing, I hope none of you have been subject to this, but sometimes we do ban accounts as well. I think we'll speak to that a little later. But just to let you know, of course, we do ban accounts. This can happen if you, violate our policies again and again and again. But also sometimes if you just, violate our policies in a very serious way, we feel that the only right action here is to actually ban the account right away. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to Akshay now, who will run you through a couple of best practices that you can follow. And I'll see you again for the live Q&A in about 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Having understood what typical actions take place when your apps are enforced, let's look at some regionally relevant and somewhat insightful, I hope, best practices that we have curated for you. Uh, these would be especially useful if you are new to Play, but there might also be certain changes or certain points which might be helpful for older developers as well, who may benefit from knowing these additional features that we have added on to your experience. So, starting on first is how do you actually reduce your app rejections, right? One of the main topics for today. So, it might sound obvious, but please do check your email or the notification that you get on Play Console for what exactly is the reason. You would be surprised that a lot of developers don't actually see their emails, or we will get to that in a second as well, on how to ensure that that does not happen for you. But do take a look at the email or the notification that you get on console when your app has been enforced, has been rejected, let's say. uh, this will give you all the details around the exact issue that took place. You will also get an option to appeal at the end of that email, so that's also a useful avenue to get more details when your app is rejected. The next point is to not resubmit without making any changes at all. Again, it might sound obvious, but we do come across a lot of developers who seem to play a gamble with just uploading their app again and hoping it gets approved. Please do not do that. Often enough, that can also result in the same number of rejections against your app, and might result in a temporarily block for your app and maybe even your account if that's a serious violation. So do make sure that you are addressing the issues that we have identified and then uploading your app for a review. The third part is, if you for some reason determine that the enforcement was incorrect, or you might need more details, then feel free to file an appeal. uh, it is not an automated response that you get through an appeal. So this question comes up often, that hey, no one is listening to my queries. We have an actual set of folks who respond to your appeals. We will be touching upon what are some best practices to make better appeals in a few slides, but do file an appeal if you need to get more details. That really helps us communicate the exact uh, clarification that you're looking for as well. And finally, um, do take a look at not accruing multiple rejections in your apps. There are certain instances wherein the same repeated rejections can cause your app to be temporarily blocked or suspended. So try to avoid having that multiple submission loop for your app as well. Let's look at the communication medium through which we send out these emails to you, as I touched upon earlier, right? So you can customize the people on your Play Console account who receive these emails. So this really helps for you to stay in the loop vis-a-vis important news, account related news that we might want to share with you, policy updates, and even enforcement comms that might be sent for some of your apps or even your account. So do take a look at who your email recipients are on Play Console, and do ensure that all the relevant folks in your teams who need to be in the loop for all of these issues are updated there appropriately. We have kept QR codes on each of these slides, so feel free to scan them if you want to take a look afterwards as well. The next point is phishing emails. So this again still continues to happen. There is a lot of interest in people gaining access to someone else's accounts, or even blackmailing certain developer account owners to get access to their accounts. So do be sure that you avoid such emails. Any legitimate email that you get from the Play team would end in at google.com only. So do not look at any other domain emails as legitimate. These will be the only ones that will communicate anything relevant and important with you. We will obviously never ask for your account credentials or your verification passcodes or whatnot. So do not share any of those if anyone asks you for those in any of these emails. The fourth tip that we have is around SDKs and best practices for using those SDKs. So, given the high scope of customization, or the propensity for customization that we have currently going on the Play Store, SDKs are something that you will eventually use quite a lot of, right? So, um, there is a lot of content on this slide. I don't want to focus too much on it, but there are a few key points which you should be aware of. So, you have more than welcome to use third party SDKs to provide an additional functionality to your app to bring in a new feature. But do note that as the app developer, it is your responsibility to ensure that your app is compliant. because a user who downloads your app will have that relationship with you, not with the SDK provider. So their trust is with you, and that relationship needs to be handled through you. So do be sure that any SDK that you integrate into your app, you're aware of what permissions it uses, what sort of use cases is it automatically enabling your app for. We often find that developers are not fully aware of all the different permissions that these SDKs can sometimes request, and they're often confused around what to do with these. So do take a look at all the permissions that these SDKs use. Um, if you do run into a non-compliant SDK issue, let's say you get an email around that. Uh, so a few ways in which you can rectify that is by the easiest probably is removing the non-compliant SDK. Another is that you can update your SDK as well. Oftentimes, we do notice that certain SDKs may have been notified of an issue, and they, having acted on that notification, have just updated their versions. So, updating your SDKs might also allow you to quickly rectify that issue. And you can also reach out to your SDK provider directly if you want more details about their data practices or their compliance with our SDK policies specifically as well. Let's quickly run through a very quick list of resources. This, I think some of you might be aware of, but good to call these out nonetheless, especially with some of the new changes that we have been putting in Play Console lately. So the first is the Google Play Developer Help Community. So this is a forum comprised of developers, and there are a lot of really experienced, really brilliant, engaged, enthusiastic developers who share a lot of their expertise. So they are called product experts, and you are more than welcome to uh, pose your own questions to this forum. So best practices around improving discoverability for your app, or navigating a specific policy violation, for example, or expanding to a specific market. So do take a look. You might just find someone else has already had that question on the forums and has been answered. We have teams who also step in to respond to some of these questions. So this can also get addressed by some folks on our team as well. Uh, we also often put out new news or updates on the forum. So it's a good place to keep an eye on. The next is a new feature that we've added on Play Console recently, which is seeking help for scenarios related to policies, app publishing, and even technical details around your app statistics, for example. So you can fill out this form. It gives you a specific ticket ID, which will be used to converse with you on the exact issue that you need some help with. So feel free to use this. The teams responding to these are in direct touch with a lot of the folks on the back end, so they frequently reach out to us for help as well. And so give it a shot, and your queries will more often than not be responded swiftly. Uh, we also have our policy updates 3 times a year, as Dan mentioned. There are also some smaller policy updates that take place, but we will always give you a heads up around those ahead of time. Whenever we do launch our or announce our new policies, we will have a policy webinar as well, and even policy bite videos. So these policy bite videos are in multiple languages to help you consume them with more ease. And the policy webinar itself is held regionally. So we have a specific dedicated webinar for several countries in Asia, and there is one for EMEA and the Americas combined as well. So these webinars give you a very quick rundown of the latest policy changes, some new upcoming deadlines, and this webinar also has a Q&A section at the end where you can post your questions and get those answered by the team as well. So we always look forward to seeing you join these and see what issues you're having with and get your feedback. Finally, here are some key resources, some links that you might want to take a note of for now and for the times to come. With that, let's move on to the Q&A. Let's start with some of the questions that came in before the session, and we can continue to take in questions that you're submitting right now, basically. So feel free to enter your questions in, and we'll take those up as well. So the first question is, what is the best way to go about deleting an app? Dan, do you want to take this?
I think, and actually correct me if I'm wrong. So I don't think you can actually, as the developer, delete an app, right? You can unpublish it though, right? Which means that you remove it from Google Play, of course, but it's not possible to have the app deleted. I do believe, though, that you can contact the developer support team and request an app to be deleted, and they will, honor your wish under some circumstances, right? I don't think they do this when apps are, for example, in a suspended state or something like that. But yeah, if you need an app to be deleted and it's unpublished or whatnot, then you should be able to reach out to the developer support team about this.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, let's take the next question. So the next question is, one of my apps was suspended. It was a body temperature app, and I could give the user an estimated temperature, but it was suspended immediately because of that. Um, so I think I can take a good guess at why this happened. So typically, we enforce on apps which promise a functionality that is deemed impossible by that device, right? So, for example, we have had apps which promised to repel mosquitoes, or apps that allowed you to understand your pets even. So yeah, it's a pretty funny field that we work in sometimes. But apps which do promise a functionality which is technically impossible to achieve will be enforced under the umbrella of deceptive behavior or sometimes misrepresentation as well. So the teams would have determined that this functionality of providing a user's body temperature is not technically feasible, which is why this app was suspended. Uh, you can make an appeal for the same and mention that uh, you would want to modify your app, or you have additional functionalities that you would offer as a part of your app, and this would not be something that you would continue with, which should allow the team to re-review your case and take it forward. So do feel free to file an appeal and provide more details around this.
One note just on this. So I just wanted to talk about our health policy. I'm not quite sure if your app is measuring the body temperature falls within the health category, but I could imagine it does. And I did want to note that we made a policy change a while back, which basically says that only developers who have an organization account are allowed to publish health-related apps. Right. So beforehand, also if you had like just a personal account, you were able to do this. We changed this to say only organizations may publish health apps. And so it's a bit unfortunate if you were one of those, personal developers who had one of these health apps. You can, of course, still publish it if you then create an organization account. But yeah, we made this change to also like so that users have more confidence in the apps that you provide, right? And I do think we have had seen some bad examples, right, where some random user using a personal account created, let's say, a low quality health app that overpromised the functionality that it actually provided, and so this is one of the reasons why we made this change. I said we're just speculating here as to the exact reason why your app was suspended, but hopefully one of them rings a bell to you. Let's have a look at the next question then.
I think Chris is also going to
Yeah.
share a QR code with you, which you can use to provide feedback, and I think also post your questions. So please feel free to scan it. Chris, you want to take over?
Yes, please, um, if you are encountering any issues, um, please scan this QR code, and we will and provide us with some feedback.
Yes.
We want to hear more about the kind of issues that you are encountering, and um, and then we can follow up with you if you'd like. So give me 1 second. Sharing back. All right, we can continue with the Q&A.
Okay, the next question is, how long does the manual app review process typically take? And are there specific triggers that cause some routine updates to get stuck in review for several days? Uh, I think this, yeah, I think this is definitely the most answered question I have ever had. So I think there is a lot of curiosity and there is a valid reason for it around app review times and who does those reviews and how long does it take, right? So uh, our reviews are a mix of information that we ascertain programmatically, and at the same time there are also elements in the review process that require a human agent to check as well. So typically no app review should take longer than 7 days, which we also mention on our policy page. However, in my practical experience, very few, if at all any, apps should take more than 3 days to get reviewed. I think the number currently is around 99% of apps get reviewed in less than 3 days or something. So that is the general experience. However, uh, there is some nuance to this as well, right? So we have seen that many teams, many companies, many developers are unaware of submitting multiple rejections. So for example, what happens is you may have uploaded your app on day one for a review. It's currently undergoing review. But then a few hours later, or maybe even the next day, while that review is still undergoing, a new update was uploaded or a new version of the app was uploaded. Maybe it wasn't deliberate, or there was someone on the play on your team specifically who uploaded or modified your apps with some new changes. But essentially, what that does is reset your app's position in the review queue. So the latest version will then be up for a review instead of the one that came in before. And this can happen multiple times. So in essence, you may be waiting for 3 days, let's say, for that review to be completed. Whereas in our review mechanism, it might just be 1 day or less than a day because we would be looking at the latest submission that came in. So do be sure of the exact changes that you are sending for review and avoid repeatedly resubmitting your apps or the same submissions basically for a review, as that will most definitely impact your review time experience as such. To the second part of the question, which is around specific triggers that will cause a longer delay. So there can be some, for instance, in real money gambling apps, there might be a license review that is required because there is a legal reason for us to review those licenses. So some of those can take a while longer. There are also certain super apps or apps which have a lot of sensitive permissions, which can take a while longer. So we want to get our review decisions correct. We do not want to needlessly enforce where we don't need to. So we might take a while longer on some of those bigger apps as well. Hope this helps.
I'm going to comment on that question as well. And so, one thing I did want to highlight is that oftentimes, when you want to publish an app for the first time, it can take a little longer. So, we, are a bit have a look at apps a bit more intensively when you publish it for the first time, right? So, you can expect this first review to take a little longer. But yeah, otherwise, please, do take note of the information that Akshay shared. I will also say, right, that it's very hard to give, answers that are applicable to all developers because, as I said before, apps are so different, right? You have to, imagine yourself, the way that we might review an app that, has access to your location and to your, I don't know, call log history, contacts, etc. Maybe one where you, also allow financial transactions. Of course, we review that type of app very differently than from an app that a father created for his son or something, right? And so yeah, we do. All in all, try to review apps as quickly as possible and also as consistently as possible. And we're always striving to optimize this. But yeah, at the moment, review times can fluctuate a little. One thing I would also note is please consider using the pre-review checks feature in console. That does check, it does a couple of basic policy checks, and you can, save yourself a rejection or two if you consistently use the pre-review checks feature. Akshay, what's the next question we have?
Let me also chime
Sorry.
in real quick on that one. Yeah. In addition to the pre-review check that you just talked about, then I think from developers from the IDEs also can look at policy insights within Android Studio, which launched, I believe, sometime last year. That would allow you to sort of find issues way before before it makes it to the console. And in addition to that, we have the pre-review check in the console that may check for some common policy issues, but consider using policy insight within Android Studio, and then the pre-review check within console as well.
Thanks, Chris. The next question is, how can developers proactively use the Google Play SDK index to prevent getting policy strikes caused by third-party SDKs? So, pretty relevant, I think, to what we discussed earlier as well. So there is a thing called a Google Play SDK index, to those of you who don't know, and it basically lists all the SDKs that are registered with the Google Play store. So there is a registration badge that an SDK provider will have if their SDK is listed with the Play Index, and this badge will indicate that they have registered with the Play SDK list, and they are committed to ensuring that their SDK does not include code that would cause their apps to violate Google Play policies. So checking on that badge, I think, will really help you in this regard. This index list will also mention the older, outdated versions of those SDKs as well, or some of them which may have some bugs. So that is also a good place to check if your app is currently on an outdated version or not. So do feel free to refer to that list as well.
Again, if I may chime in, two things that come to mind for me from the SDK perspective, and Akshay, talked about this before, but some SDKs, they access sensitive user permissions, right? And of course, in that case, it's your responsibility as the developer to make sure that that you comply with the requirements that we set out, right? So it's no use saying, hey, it's not me, it's the SDK, right? If you're using that SDK in your app, you need to make sure that your app complies with our policies. And so sometimes, we require you to use a prominent disclosure, for example, so to give users some choice whether or not these permissions can be accessed. Another
Can
thing
you give
that
can you give an example of that then?
Sure. So, I remember seeing an SDK that would, for example, access background location. And so, in this case, we have quite, specific requirements around background location. And so, in this case, right, it's your responsibility as the developer to inform your users that you're accessing this information and to give the users the choice, also to decline its usage. For example, right? So it's really important that you understand beforehand what type of data the SDKs are accessing before implementing it. The one other thing I would just mention is that I think Akshay alluded to this earlier as well, is that there are some SDK that really that promise for you to make loads of money by using it, by monetizing your users, by using an SDK. Essentially, what some of these SDKs do is they collect a lot of user data and sell it, right? And again, I think it's in your responsibility to understand exactly what the SDKs do beforehand, and to then judge yourself whether you want to use it or not. But I have seen developers run into issues by using these type of SDKs because we do not allow their usage, and the SDKs are also not featured on the SDK index either. Okay, enough about SDKs. Let's see what else we have in store, Akshay.
Yeah. The next question is around testing tracks. So it goes like this: when using the app testing tracks mentioned, do policy enforcements on a closed testing track impact our developer account standing? as harshly as enforcements on a production track? Uh, Pretty good, relevant, I think, question to answer as well. So, no, they do not, with a couple of small exceptions. But this is a pretty good practice to ensure that your app is well tested and is has been through some users before it actually rolls out to your production users. So do feel free to check out the various ways in which you can use the testing tracks. There are a bunch. Depending on your exact scenario, you might want to prefer one over the other. But these testing tracks are also typically excluded from a full holistic policy review as well. So there are only very specific policies which these testing tracks might be subject to, like malware, for instance. But this could be a good way to test how your app is performing. And then eventually, when you might want to roll it out to your production or alpha users, then you might just be subject to a full review. But until then, this remains a pretty good, smart way to be proactive about testing your app.
One thing I'd like to note again, I just spoke to a developer about this, so it's very timely. And so essentially, we have also the internal testing track, and this one, this one is exempt from virtually all types of reviews. So essentially, if you only use an internal testing track, you can essentially, your review will be done most of the time within minutes or an hour, and it's not subject to reviews. The other testing tracks, so closed testing tracks, internal testing tracks, they are, as Akshay said, they are subject to far less policy reviews. They are subject to some. And so they do allow you to, to publish your app to these testing tracks faster than if you were to do it through production track. So the one mistake that some developers do is they submit, they make a submission for closed testing or for open testing, and when that's done, they're like, okay, great, we're going to promote this to production, and off they go. And then they're sometimes surprised that then the review for the production track actually takes far longer than the closed testing track. For example. And as said, that is because we do make a more comprehensive review for production track releases. So just be mindful of that, and don't think that, hey, close testing only took so and so long, that'll also be the same amount of time will take for the production track review. But all in all, using these different testing tracks is really, it's important to understand this. And as said, it's really the best practice is probably also to use the internal testing track as a first release, and then to move to the other tracks following that.
Thanks. Thanks, Dan. We have a few questions coming in through the live chat on YouTube and on LinkedIn as well. So let's take those up as well.
Mhm.
Uh, so the first question I think I can see coming in from LinkedIn is, thank you for this question, by the way. Pretty, I think, relevant for plenty of folks. Uh, the question goes like this: suppose that my app has three functions, A, B, and C. When I update the function A and request an app review, do you guys review the whole three functions again? Um, I wish I had a different answer. Then it depends, but it depends to an extent what these functions we're talking about. But typically, it should not be subject to a whole review. Predominantly, there are ways in which we can detect what the delta has been for your app, what additional, let's say, permissions are being sought, or what permissions are not being sought, what um, metadata description may have changed, what new feature has been added. So we can detect some of those, and those specific parts may be subject to a review in the new submission. However, there is a chance that in, let's say, the other two features of your app, they may not have been subject to a review previously, or they may have a knock-on effect because of the additional functionality or an additional disclosure that your app might require. So your app could be subject to, let's say, an additional requirement depending on the feature that you're adding or how that feature affects your other existing features as well. Dan, any thoughts on this?
So I would just say, be very transparent in your Google Play listing about the type of features that you offer. So I know, especially like when we review new apps, we do have a look at, hey, what are you saying on your Google Play listing, and how does that compare to the in-app experience? Right. So if you're only adding a certain functionality later on, then please don't, mention that in your Google Play listing, right? Because then the team will they might say, "Hey, the developer is being a bit deceptive here, right? They're mentioning and promoting features that aren't even available in the app yet, right?" So just be wary of that. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
One quick thing there also. One thing that might delay your app reviews is if suppose you have some sort of login for your app, providing upfront the login credentials, test login credentials to the testing team can help uh, really fast track your reviews. Otherwise, they'll have to request it and not get in your app.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's really, one thing that is worth spending 1 minute on at least. I think, between three of us, these login credential issues, it's a bit of an evergreen. It kind of, you'd think that nowadays, we don't have to mention it over again, but I think in every single webinar I've been in, we've talked about login credentials because it's developers just forget about this, right? And our, stance on this is that if your app is restricted by login credentials, you need to provide them to our reviewers, right? And I think you have a real opportunity here to also, influence the outcome of the review process. You can provide multiple sets of login credentials. You can provide explanations to all of them. So please make use of that. One thing, that where I've seen this is very helpful is, offering different types of logins. If users sometimes have different experiences based on the geography from where they access the app. And so you could, for example, provide one set of login credentials that, via which our reviewers experience the experience from country A, and then another set for country B, for example. This isn't relevant for everyone, but as said, if you have, if your app is login restricted, or if certain features require a login to test them, you need to allow our users, our reviewers, to test this, and for this you can use login credentials.
One last thing here. Then you talked about how keeping the Play Store listing information up to date is super important for reviews. It's also super important for the new Ask Play feature that we just launched recently, which uses those information to surface to users the your app for you. So it's very important that it's accurate for your own discoverability.
Great point. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's take up the next question. Um, I think my voice is a bit difficult to hear. I'll speak a bit louder, so apologies if you were struggling to hear me. So, this question goes like this: many developers in Africa experience heavy friction regarding identity and address verification. What are the best resources to understand exactly which local documents are acceptable for verification? Really great question. I think the market specific rollout of the Play Store and your merchant account setup, I think, comes up often. Unfortunately, we have not covered the entire continent when it comes to offering Play services or allowing you to set up your merchant accounts. We are in the process of expanding it to all of those countries. But if you are based in one of these uh, current in scope countries in the continent, then as a initial step in when you create your account, you will be asked to provide a Duns and Bradsters DNB number basically. So that number will allow you to provide the exact verification required to get your account verified. Dan here, I think, has handled a lot of these verification questions as well. So, Dan, any specific best practices in this regard?
Yeah, so just we started this whole verification project a couple of years ago, and it was quite a big undertaking because it meant we had to verify existing developer accounts. And so, thanks to all of you who have done this. hopefully everyone kind of got worked through it okay. And so nowadays, when you create a new account, you need to finish the verification there and then. And there's a different process for personal accounts versus organizational accounts. And so I will say, right, that I'm not familiar, obviously, with all the ins and outs of various different African countries, and I can imagine, right, that maybe there have been like issues where we're asking for a very specific type of documentation that just isn't available in this country, and so in these cases we have made the team working on verification aware of these things, and then they were able to change the processes and the documentation that they request. The one thing you really shouldn't do is, if the document isn't available, then don't use Photoshop to kind of like, change your document in around in some shape or form that it looks like you're providing the right document. When we see people doing this, then we ultimately ban their accounts because it's considered very fraudulent. So if there is an issue in some country where you're really struggling and you think Google has unreasonable expectations in the type of documents that we're requesting, please use the form that Chris provided, and we can promise to look into this with the relevant team. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, let me add some color to this question. It's especially important for regions like sub-Saharan Africa because addresses don't come in the same way we expect them in the US or in Europe, and I want to clarify that we do have on the play support page actually a list of valid document that we accept, um, and so I will make sure to share that after the session, and also make sure, as Dan said, that you look through this list and provide that kind of documents. If you have any sort of documents that's official and that's being rejected, please do use this QR code to share it with us. I'm also hoping to bring in at some point in this Android office hours the team actually behind this document verifications so they can talk directly to you and talk through some of the pitfalls that we see in this kind of scenario. We actually do see, believe it or not, developers submitting over and over the same documents that are being rejected. And so make sure that you look through our documentation on the place support site for valid document that we currently accept. We're going through that list every single time we get new documents that are official to update it, but we can do more here. So please keep the feedback coming.
Great. Let's take the next question. I think this one is through LinkedIn as well, right, Chris? So I think this question goes like this. Uh, how many people participate in an app review? One person per app or something. So I think I should have a T-shirt called "It Depends," I suppose, but uh, it really does depend on the exact app in question. But I'll give you a very quick overview of how these reviews take place, right? So when an app is submitted or uploaded, it will be subject to a number of different checks across its metadata, its technicalities, its technical details, apologies, and those will be the ones that uh, get flagged either for a human review or not. Some of them will require it, some of them will not, depending on, again, the changes that have been made, the size of the app, the in scope features that have been flagged for a review. So it depends entirely on that. Dan, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think, like I said, we have a lot of policies, we have a lot of requirements, and yeah, we normally have, we have reviewers specialized in different areas, so it's not like, one single reviewer knows all our policies and requirements and checks one app against all of these. That's not quite how it works. But yeah, again, we try to be a bit transparent about what we can share or not, but yeah, hopefully that adds some color to how our reviews work. But yeah, we can't divulge everything, unfortunately.
Uh, yeah, good point. I think that the policies are also varied. So there might be a different team that might be brought in for a specific policy or a specific region, even, or a specific language, even. So it's a complex mix of your region, your app language, your functionalities, your permissions, which is why it depends. Okay, let's take one last question. Uh, I think we already
It,
covered this
yeah, I
one.
believe this is the one
Hmm.
we just answered. So we
Yeah,
can go back to the previous one. Then
okay,
we
those.
often
Uh,
see developers unaware of this. Okay, this is related to the previous question. Um, yeah, let's take this one instead.
So this is about DUNS numbers. So I think obtaining a DUNS number for organization verification is a massive hurdle in many SSA countries. Does the Play team offer alternative verification pathways or advice on this? So yeah, Akshay mentioned this before, right? We work together with DUNS, and so if you're an organization, then you have to have a DUNS number and provide that during verification. And I understand that DUNS has different companies that they work with in different countries, and so in those countries you have to obviously work through them. I think I have also heard that once in a while maybe those companies, they weren't as responsive as they should have been or so, but we have collected that feedback and we try to pass that on with them to them. um, I have to say, I'm not. I can't say as of now that hey, that of course, we have alternative verification pathways if the DUNS provider that you have in your country sucks or whatnot. Um, but I do think, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, right? I do think we're interested in hearing about in which countries you're facing some roadblocks, etc. And we can get in touch with the team, or they can maybe even address this live in one of the Android office hours here.
Yes.
Yeah, please provide feedback on this to us.
Yes, please use the form. If you are seeing issues with DONS, use this form. We want to hear more about this space, and we want to find ways to make it easier for you to get your developer account. Let me clarify a couple of things though. First, um, if you are an Android developer, you are entitled to a free DONS number through DNB. Now, in SSA, this may come from third party entities, and they may take up to 30 days. Keep that in mind. Be early in your preparation. And yes, like Dan said, some of the third party entities may upsell you on getting you the DONS number faster. We've seen this happen, but to clarify, you don't have to go through that route. You can just stick to the free route, which can take a little longer, but you should be able to get your DONS number. And if you are having issues, please let us know, and then we'll follow up with you.
Thanks, Chris. Uh, I think you can also provide us some feedback using the same QR code. And Chris, I think, also has a link through which you can share your feedback for this session. So please feel free to fill it out. It will help us customize this content and also better understand the type of areas that you are facing some friction in. We're constantly looking for areas to improve on Play Console, on our policies, in our app reviews, our appeals, you name it. So your feedback is of paramount importance to us. Uh, Over to you, Chris and Dan.
Chris, I'll hand over to you. I just want to say from my end one last parting word, and that is, I hope you found this useful. Maybe we'll be invited again, if so, and if Chris wants us back. But yeah, we do really appreciate having a forum to pass on this information to you. We do take this feedback very seriously, and we also, I will say, right, we monitor all sorts of things that are said and about the Google Play Store etc. I know there are very active Reddit communities. Our Google Play developer community is very active, and yes, we also have a look at the complaints that are raised there, right, about unreasonable account bans and suspensions, etc. And like I said, I think of course, once in a while we also get things wrong, but I will also say, right, that oftentimes these public posts, they don't tell the full story, right? And I can't tell you, the amount of very, very poor quality apps that I've seen in my time, and developers complaining why they were treated in a certain way. But yeah, like I said, we really appreciate this, and maybe we'll see you again. Until then, we hope the information provided helps you, and we wish you a successful future using Google Play. Thanks again, Chris. Over to you, and best of luck to your team if you're whoever you're supporting on the World Cup today.
Thank you very much, Dan and Akshay. Really, thank you for joining these office hours. As you can see, we have tons of questions in the chat we didn't get to. There is a lot of interest in this area, so definitely plan to come back sometime soon. Also, for the questions that we didn't get to, folks, we'll make sure to address them in the next Android office hours. We'll work with Dan and Akshay to get you those answers. And for now, we say goodbye. But before we go, please take a moment to scan this QR code, give us feedback on the overall Android office hours. We also pasted in the chat the form to give us feedback on the play issues that you've seen. Please use those. We will not get offended. Be as blunt as you want, and then keep on building on Android. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.